the Van Wezel is kind of an interesting story. And I want this presentation to be beyond just an update on where the preservation effort stands, and kind of pull back some of the curtain so that you can see the behind the scenes of what went on as part of the effort. Because it's interesting, usually when you have some type of historic preservation effort, you're talking about a building that first takes education to the public. What building are you talking about? If you mention the McAlpin House, usually you get that kind of crooked face of they don't know what building you're talking about. But this is the Van Wezel. This is a building that everyone in Sarasota knew about and was still being actively used, is being actively used. So this was an interesting effort insofar as you've got to wonder, how did we get to a place that we're preserving a building that everyone knows about, is an icon for the city, and is currently being actively used, and yet it was in jeopardy of being lost to the community. To a large extent, it began right here in Crocker Church. And it began with the Historical Society, because this organization was the catalyst to start the community conversation. And I'll go into that, the behind the scenes of why that was an effort unto itself. But kudos to all of you, because without the Historical Society and without the Crocker Church and without that presentation, I believe the Van Wezel might have been seriously in jeopardy. But this goes back to all of you. So, to go to how the Van Wezel became in jeopardy takes a moment. We really should take a step back, taking a page from Jeff. To understand where we are, you have to know history. And that was part of the problem with the Van Wezel. So, back in 2000, there was a large remodeling of the building. And in addition to several minor things, the fly tower, which is the stage where the performances occur, it was made taller to accommodate Broadway shows, because they wanted to focus more on touring Broadway. And the great thing about that, it was a wild success. And now that's a big part of the schedule. But what occurred right afterwards? People started looking at the parking lot, because you decided, the community thought there's got to be better use for the land than just surface parking. So a lot of discussion occurred. And what came out of that was informally known as the Cooper's Plan. And Cooper's Robinson, which is a design firm, came up with a multi-use plan for the parking lot. And you can kind of see it here with various buildings around. There was still a Gee Whiz in the background. And they were really going to activate the area. But what happened to this plan? Well, 2009 and the financial crisis occurred. And these plans were shelved. But everyone still saw the parking lot. And you knew something better could occur. So the community started talking amongst itself. And an informal group started to coalesce and solidify and became known as the Bayfront 2020. And these individuals went around to the entire city, and they spoke to everyone, trying to get feedback. What did you want the land to be? And what coalesced in those discussions, in that effort, was let's turn the area into a park. Rather than building more buildings, the community wanted a park. And that's where this group continued on. And ultimately, it became what we know now as the Bay Park Conservancy. So the Bay Park Conservancy, which was the Bay Park 2020, Bayfront 2020, thought of, let's design this wonderful park around the area beside the Van Wezel as well as the parking lot. And what also came through there was the idea of, well, backing up for a bit. So people are thinking, let's build a park. But the Van Wezel was wildly successful in getting its Broadway shows. And that started squeezing the orchestra, because the orchestra was and still is the #1 client, customer of the Van Wezel. And as more Broadway shows started to be scheduled, the days that the orchestra could play at the Van Wezel started to get tighter and tighter. Another thing occurred for the orchestra was that even though when they made the fly tower taller, they could accommodate more advanced, more sophisticated Broadway shows, but it hurt the acoustics. And the orchestra struggled for many years to try and get back to the acoustic balance that the hall had prior to the remodel. So all of this was swirling around at the time. And at some point, at around 2000, the orchestra said, you know, these growing pains of trying to expand what we want to present, plus the changes that occurred to the building, pushed them to decide, hey, let's get our own concert hall. Because when you think of what is the most optimal hall for Broadway, as it turns out, that's not optimal for acoustic. Because Broadway, like myself here, has amplified sound. And the thing with amplified sound is when you don't have the mic, it makes it much tougher. But you can design buildings that are acoustically sound for non-amplified sound, like the Van Wezel was before the fly tower. So the orchestra is thinking about another building. And so everybody in their minds start thinking about, well, the orchestra is looking for another building. And that led us to the group that I joined and the Crocker Church presentation. Because unfortunately, there started to become a mindset that for some reason, the Van Wezel, rather than becoming the pride and joy of the city, became an impediment to growth. That somehow the obsolescence of the Van Wezel, if we can convince the community that the Van Wezel is no longer acceptable, that it's no longer useful, that it's dangerous to go into it, that it's about to crumble, it'll be an easier sell for a new building. And so my group, I'm an accountant. I joined individuals from the Alliance, Lori Moldoni, Christopher Wilson, names that you, of course, are familiar with, along with other names still familiar with, architects, Carl Abbott, Mark Smith, who became a commissioner, and even Harvard attorney Robert Radin. And we were all looking at this building, trying to figure out, is the Van Wezel obsolete? And we spent a lot of time doing a ton of research. I was trying to hold up the mic and the book. This is a consolidation of what we took both to the county and the city of our findings. And what did we find? Well, for first, we found out that the Van Wezel actually had a study done, and the city kept it in their pocket for non-public reasons. They never quite explained why they were promoting that the Van Wezel was obsolete, and yet they had an engineering firm saying the building was sound. We also found something else. They were saying that the Van Wezel could no longer compete, that somehow it had gotten too small, that it couldn't get the shows, that if only we had a slightly larger hall, or maybe a much bigger hall, that would attract shows that we couldn't get right now. And what's interesting about that, we had found, our group, which included theatrical experts, just the opposite. That what was preventing Sarasota from getting first-run touring acts was not the size of the Van Wezel, but our proximity to Tampa. And why? Because Tampa is a larger population. They can sell more tickets. The producers are, at the end of the day, it's a money-making venture. So if they can sell more tickets, they're going to offer it to Tampa first. And like NFL blackouts, anyone that's a football fan knows, when you turn on the TV and you want to watch the Bucs, you want to watch the local games, they're blacked out. Why? To get you to the stadium. The blackouts are the same thing. And our group also was curious to say, is this a unique occurrence? So we went across the state, over to the East Coast, and we took a look at Broward County and compared Broward County to Palm Beach, because Palm Beach has the Kravitz Center, which is similar. It's actually larger than the Van Wezel. It has around 2,200 seats. But it competes with the largest hall in all of Florida, which is the Broward Center. And we found out that when the Kravitz wanted to have Wicked, they had to wait 5 years because Palm Beach couldn't lure the production of Wicked beyond, simply because Broward County has a larger population. And they can do exactly what Tampa does to us. And they can use their population to kind of brute force what they want as first-run shows. What was also surprising at the time, and this is a little bit about behind the curtain. So we knew, our little group, that the people that were promoting the new area, the new Performing Arts Center, would have slick materials to prove that we're wrong. And they spent a lot of time with marketing to go step by step, saying things like, the Van Wezel isn't a Frank Lloyd Wright building. It was his son-in-law that designed it. Never saying that the son-in-law was also the lead architect for the Guggenheim. surprising than that, and this really caught our group off guard, was the city got involved with the act. And right after the Crocker Church presentation, immediately afterwards, the city started sending out letters. And what the letters said was ignore the residents, ignore Carl Abbott, ignore Lori, ignore Christopher Wilson. They don't understand. The Van Wezel is obsolete. It cannot support the community any longer, and we need a new hall. And this was the part I wanted to tell you, because if you received one of these emails, and it's now going well beyond 2 years ago, it caught everyone off guard. Because you don't expect, well, back then, okay, I was naive. Back then, I did not expect the government to put out propaganda against facts. It should have been prescient at the time of times to come. But nonetheless, our group persevered. And I'm happy to say, public sentiment had completely changed. Again, beginning with you, beginning with the Crocker Church, and our group just focused on the facts and having conversations like this spreading out what is reality. And we had 2,700 people sign a petition. We had gotten the city to actually put out an advisory committee, a purple ribbon committee of experts to actually investigate the building, to get a professional analysis of what should be done. Is the building obsolete? And they had an extensive architectural analysis, as well as a theatrical analysis done, as well as an acoustic analysis done. And not surprising, they found the building sound, satisfactory in all regards. So the good thing is, the Purple Cow has gone from a tarnished reputation back to the beloved landmark that everyone in this room hopefully shares with me. And I think that's important for historic preservation. And we also found out that when you talk about hundreds of thousands of dollars for a new building, the Purple Ribbon Committee actually reinforced what this little working group that I was involved with had. That the Van Wezel can be flood-proofed, what they call dry-proofed, which means that it can be kept dry from last year's storms. The damage that it received, about, $7 to $9 million, the final tally hasn't still come in. But we could have protected that building for $800,000. So it shows you that historic preservation can literally pay. Financially, if you just look at the numbers, me being an accountant, it makes sense. The Sarasota Orchestra. So they've gone out and they've purchased land opposite of Lowe's out on Fruitville, right by 75. And they are going to try and build a concert hall. Roughly, their current estimates is around $425 million is what the complex is going to cost. I know. But, to their credit, getting back to the specifications of a hall, an acoustic hall has different characteristics than a Broadway presenting hall. So it's understandable. I'm not sure at that level, but it's understandable why they are longing for a hall that has better acoustics qualities. And then, what about the people that wanted to demolish, well, not demolish, but make the Van Wezel obsolete? And it's the obsolescence that continues to remind me of the G Whiz. That you first have a vacant building for a number of years, then it becomes an eyesore. So where does this stand? Where they're still trying to figure out how to pay for the SPAC. And I won't go into the TIF. I love talking about the TIF, but I'm an accountant. So if anyone here wants an explanation of the TIF, I can do that, but we'll do that during Q&A. But needless to say that I couldn't come up for the city's funding, that the city's cost for this proposal right now. The funding, the revenue that would come from the TIF is insufficient to pay for the building and the parking and the land. It just doesn't work, the numbers. So we'll see where this goes. The City Commission is going to take up this conversation at the end of the month. And the foundation is still even looking for where are they going to put the parking, as well as where will the building go. Even though they found an architect, the site is still up in the air, as well as how to get to the building. So there's still a lot of questions, let alone, for my sake, the underlining question. You know, the reason why you would even have that discussion is why? What are you trying to do with this building? If the Van Wezel is effective at presenting the shows we want to see, and my group was able to verify that if you want to see a show, most of the time, close to 85% of the time, you can get tickets for any show you want. Why are we doing this? So that still needs to be answered as well. But the conversation still continues.